On this episode of Locked On Lightning, join me once again as we are watching the end of the Lightning game. They are matching up against the Calgary Flames. Hopefully they could pull this one out. I think they will. They've played thus far. We talk about all of that and more. But first, let's play that music.
You're Locked On Lightning, your daily podcast on the Tampa Bay Lightning. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome to another episode of Locked On Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam Danker. I'd like to thank all of you for making us your first listen of the day. And if you're watching us on YouTube, thank you for making us your first watch of the day. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the podcast. Drop us a thumbs up and comment below. Let us know what you want to hear more of. Who do you think is on the up and up for this Lightning team? Who do you think is struggling to start the season? To answer that last question or that comment, I don't see really any player. I mean, we spoke about Ross Colton, scored a goal in his last game. Starting to see a little bit of improvement from Ross here and there. But, overall, this team has really started to take a foot in the right direction over the last week or so. Pretty much, this entire month, I think November has been drastically a better month. Now, obviously, for reasons that are pretty obvious, November has been a better month than the month of October for the Tampa Bay Lightning, considering that I spoke about it, and I made sure to preface every statement I said in October that yes, the Lightning were struggling throughout that time. And the way they were playing at certain moments throughout the month of October was just disappointing. Obviously, not living up to expectations, but the schedule for November was lining up to be in Lightning's favor. As we are looking at the schedule thus far, picking up, going 2-1 their first week. That one loss comes at the hands of the Carolina Hurricanes, and then the second week, was split. Kind of figured, out of that Capitals series that you were going to get at least one game where the Capitals were going to be able to get the edge on the Lightning. So they were able to pick up that win at home, which I think is the far more important one. If we had to really distinguish which game was probably better. I've always been a firm believer that, especially when you're a team that is as good as Tampa, you got to take advantage of every game at home and try to dominate as much as you can. And then this week has been off to a good start. Hard-fought win against Dallas, and in OT. The game, the ending, or I would say the last period, was something left to be desired for the Tampa Bay Lightning, the way they played that game. But I thought overall that game was played very well. It was, for the most part, a very technically sound played game for Tampa Bay. You start to see them really start to do the little things correctly. And I've always been a firm believer, and I've always said on this show that if the Lightning do the little things consistently, then all those the big plays, the fancy plays, the big saves by Vazzy, that is all going to come. That's all an added plus. Tampa, regardless of how you feel about their roster, which I started at the end of the year saying that this was a top-heavy team, and you could see it in the early stages. They have really started to come along on all four lines. That fourth line is still lagging at times, I think. I think that, I just don't feel that Corey Perry is going to be thriving long-term this year on that fourth line. I don't think this team is going to be able to thrive in the long term with Corey Perry on the fourth line. So I think eventually we will see him be moved to that third line. But, thus far, everything's good. but yeah, the play that we saw from Dallas, and that was the kind of play that I've thoroughly enjoy seeing this Tampa team play. Like I said, for the most part, disciplined. When they do make mistakes, they do a good job of really, I guess, catching themselves when they fall, I guess is the right phrase to really put it. Um, and then what they have done, they've done a very good job tonight against this Calgary Flames team, which I said, are they the big bad Flames that we saw at certain points throughout the regular season last year? No, not necessarily record wise. I think that, Calgary, I think if you ask any Flames fan where this team at is right now, statistically in the standings in their division, it's probably not what you would like out of them. Doesn't necessarily mean that they are a bad team or a team that you should sleep on. And thus far, the Lightning have done a very good job against the Flames. I mean, you're going up at, and I said this was going to be a tall task. Going up after just facing Jake Ottinger of the Dallas Stars, putting five goals on Jake Ottinger is a tough feat. But doing that against the Dallas Stars team, who is playing very well at the top of their division right now, and then going into the next matchup playing against Jacob Markstrom, who I think is, I would say, if he's not in the top 5, I would say he's number 6 in goaltenders. I I don't think right now is the conversation to really open up that door of whether, who's top 5 in the league. I mean, we could probably, I'll talk about that on a later episode, because it is no small feat to beat Ottinger, and potentially, if the score stays the same right now, Markstrom in consecutive games. So that is something that the Lightning should be very happy about, if they do end up pulling off, and then they'll pulling off this win, and then they're going to have to go to Nashville on Saturday and play against UC Soros, who is a very good goaltender as well, who I believe is in the conversation. I believe he finished third in the Vezina Trophy standings last year. So I would say, I mean, I know that the top 3 conversation for goaltenders in the league is always, it's always evolving. Vazzy, Hellebuck, and depending on who you talk to, depending on what day of the week, you might get a different answer. You might get Markstrom, you might get Ottinger. Some people might even say Saros as well. So, the Lightning, the potential to go up against 3 very good goaltenders, top 5 goaltenders, 3 goaltenders that could potentially be put in the conversation for top 3, alongside Hellebuck and Vasilevskiy. I think that means, really, that points out to the Lightning playing very well-rounded, fundamental hockey, and you saw it in tonight's game. And we'll talk about it as we progress with this episode. But yeah, I mean, looking at the numbers, very efficient. The Lightning they just got their power play killed, and now we got a little bit of fireworks going on right now. We got a little scuffle behind the net. This was kind of boiling all night. This was a very physical game. There were some hits that were laid, some that each team didn't really technically like, and I think that is Fleury that's on the floor. That looks like Hayden Fleury, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, that is Fleury. He's I have to say, though, with Fleury, since I just brought him up and he's on the screen, very scrappy. I love what he's brought to this team thus far. There's no such thing as having too much scrap, I guess, on a team, especially when you have the level of scorers on this team. For Tampa Bay, you always kind of want to have that depth grinder guy, whether it be on the fourth line or those lower pairings for the defensive core. So But the Lightning have done a very good job tonight staying out of the penalty box. Only 3 penalties called on them. One of them, I believe it was hooking on Hagel at some point. I think it was in the second. Very soft, penalty call by the refs there, and I tweeted about it, and I basically said that it's the way the officiating has trended this year, and I know I'm a little bit all over the place right now in the first segment because there's really been a lot to digest and take um, from this game because the way have the Lightning have played really make you want to go back and rewatch some of the games or just reflect on what has happened thus far this week with Tampa Bay Lightning. But yeah, real quick with the officiating, I'm worried for the game of hockey if this is where we're trending with the officiating. We see what it's doing to Major League Baseball. We see how much of a mess at certain points the National Football League is. I do not want this to happen for the NHL. It started last year in the playoffs. The officiating was absolutely horrendous. There's a difference between letting them play and then just being completely inconsistent. And that was what the playoffs were for the most part. It was just inconsistent officiating by the referees, and it's kind of continued into this year where I feel like we're calling way more penalties that are warranted, and it's really slowing the game down. And at certain times, they call a penalty here in this situation, but they don't call it there in another situation. And yes, I get it. Sometimes you miss a call, but when it's happening consistently and it's happening on both sides, it's not just against the Lightning. There's also instances where calls are being made for the Lightning, and it may be a get you back call, and I totally get that, but there's a time and a place for that. But yeah, it leads to maybe further confrontations in games as well. So I mean, very inconsistent. Not really happy about it. All we could do is hope for the best with the officiating going forward. So we're going to talk about more about this game, some of the things that really impressed me going forward with this game as it winds down in the third period. We have about a little under 4 minutes left in the third. The Lightning are up 3-1. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. First, I want to tell you that today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline.net. Now, BetOnline.net is your number one source for your sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get all the latest odds, trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from football to basketball, soccer, hockey, and esports. We got it all here. They're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. Bet online, where the game starts. So before I get into it more about this game, I just want to thank everybody for making us your first listen of the day. And if you haven't already, please go ahead and subscribe to the podcast. Follow us wherever podcasts are distributed in audio form. And most importantly, go on our YouTube page. Drop a comment below, hit a thumbs up button, and most importantly, subscribe and hit that notification button. So as soon as the newest episode drops, you are aware and you could watch. And if you want to follow us on our social media pages, go ahead on the ticker below. If you're watching us on YouTube, LO_Lightning on Twitter, as well as LockedOn_Lightning on Instagram. And you can follow me on Twitter at DankyDank, DENKY, D8NK. I love hearing from all of you. I love the back and forth that we have had all season thus far. Let's keep it up. If you want to tweet to me about something about the Lightning, whether it be in-game or post-game or pre-game or whatever, go ahead. If you want to message me, you feel more comfortable doing that. Love hearing from all of you. I try to get back to all of you as fast as I can. So go ahead and do that. So yeah, things that really stuck out to me in this game that I have already sort of spoken about already. From the initial puck drop, I thought the Lightning did a very good job of sizing up Calgary. They did a very good job of doing that and not being overly cautious. What we've seen from Tampa in most instances is every team has I guess a warm-up period, if you want to call it that, in the opening minutes, whether it be the first 10 or the first 5. Teams like to kind of use that time to kind of measure out what the other team is doing, see what kind of get a measuring or just a temperature reading of what kind of game this is going to be. Is this going to be an intense game, or is this going to be a kind of just a chess match that kind of something that we have seen tonight um, from Tampa, kind of just scoping things out, and we kind of figured just by the way both these teams have played for the most part, this has been a chess match. And what I like about Tampa the most is that they have been reactionary, but in a good way, not in a way where they're kind of allowing Calgary to get things going. Other than the Lindholm goal in the third period on the power play, which things to me, I'm not entirely worried about that. I wasn't angry about that goal. I mean, just the way things were trending, the way Calgary was skating, you kind of figured, especially being on the man advantage, that something like that was going to happen sooner rather than later. But Tampa did very good job early on, putting in a lot of work in front of Vasilevskiy, allowing him to settle in, clogging up the shooting lanes, something that we saw them do a very good job of in the game against Dallas. So when Tampa does things like that, when they, like I said, when they do the technical things the correct way, it really opens up the door for them to really get everything else going. And especially, if you're clogging up shooting lanes and passing lanes, more likely than not, you'll get a lot of blocks, and you'll set yourself up for some rushes on the other side of the ice in your favor. Steven Stamkos started this one out with a goal. I believe he has 2 points tonight thus far. Yes, he does. So Stamkos, after not scoring for a couple of games, really starting to get things going again. Um, what else is there really to say about this guy? He gets his 500th career assist the other night. I spoke about it on the previous episode about how really he's really starting, to get himself up there, and where are we gonna place him in the hallways, I guess, of NHL 11 legends, if you want to say that, because he's approaching a couple of milestones, 1,000 games, 1,000 points. I believe he's up there. Yeah, he's about to hit 500 career goals as well. So I mean, that's a Hall of Fame resume right there. 2 Stanley Cups. I mean, it's one of those things. It really is a treat to see him and Kucherov on a nightly basis really just go out there and do what they do best, and that's score. And uh, speaking of Kucherov, great goal from him tonight as well. I've really seen him and a power play goal. So you love those power play goals. As much as I've criticized this Tampa team over the last couple of seasons, really, they've done a phenomenal job. And I'm sure I'll bring this up at some point when they go through their little run on the power play. They do go. I do like to think that their power play percentage is a little bit engorged, given that they don't so much as look as though they're a consistent team on the power play. They more so just score in bunches on those chances. So they'll go 4 or 5 games, maybe scoring one power play goal in like maybe 10 plus chances, and then they'll go another 4, going maybe like 4 for 8 or something crazy like that. And that's really where that is a little inflated. So it does look like the Lightning are going to pull this one out. We have 27 seconds and counting here in the closing seconds with Markstrom pulled. I don't think Tampa's just, oh, well, here we go. That is offsides. Nope, that's a goal. So Kucherov gets his second of the game. That makes it 4-1 on the empty netter. Yeah, so I mean, Kucherov, gotta love those empty netters. I'm sure he enjoys those. Yeah, that, and he's another one who, what has really impressed me a lot about Cooch lately is that, and I've criticized him quite a bit for it, and I try not to. We do see, or we do have these moments with Kucherov, or these sequences whether it be throughout the course of an entire game or just, periods where, and that is, by the way, his ninth goal of the season. We do have this moments with Cooch where it seems as though he's not as engaged as he should be, whether it be that the other team is doing a good job of just shutting him out, which I find that very hard to believe, that he's not that kind of player that could easily just get shut out like that. He's more of a guy that makes room for himself and allows his creativity to really flourish when he's really out there, kind of like I equate him to kind of like the point guard, especially on the man advantage. When he has the puck, he does a very good job of distributing and also finding space for himself for scoring chances. And he has really been more assertive as of late, and you could see it in the numbers. So, when you got him rolling, you got Stamkos rolling. Things are really starting to come together for this Lightning team. So to put it in perspective, over the last 5 games for Cooch, real quick, he has 7 points. So, glad to see that he's starting to get going, and really starting to get hot and stay consistently hot as the games progress. Now, if Point could get on a roll, I mean, potentially down the line, the Lightning, we at the end of this month, I think we could start having the conversation of them possibly threatening for that number one spot in the Atlantic Division. So wrapping things up, yeah, good win tonight. I really like what we're seeing from Tampa thus far in the month of November. I really think that the Lightning are trending in the right direction. Obviously, I say that with them picking up their third win in a row. So, very good job from this Lightning team. They pick up those 2 points. And right now, as of now, I'm not even looking at the other scores, but they are, as of now, tied with Toronto, I believe. Nope, let's look real quick. Yeah, they would be tied with Toronto in points. So, they're really, like I said, how important it was to really accumulate as many points as the month of November, because December will go by very quickly. And then we're at the threshold, at least for me, in terms of, what you see is what you get in New Year. And whatever, like I always say, whatever team you are by New Year is pretty much what you're going to get for the rest of the season, barring some incredible deal that is made at the trade deadline. So, glad to see Tampa starting to really pick it up. I think I said on the other episode that, really Boston is the only team I'm kind of concerned about in this division. And I would have to say I'm probably going to stay pat on that view, because Toronto, they're just a team that is just, I don't know how to feel about them, because, and maybe this is just me being biased and seeing what they have done over the last couple of years. And we always love to make fun of the Toronto Maple Leafs, and the lack of success and versus the standards and expectations that are surrounding this team. So, you know, really what it comes down to, and I think what it comes down to is experience versus experience. And yeah, there's a difference between the experience that Toronto has had and the experience that Boston has had. Because if you look at some of these players on Boston, especially the David Krejci, Patrice Bergeron, Brad Marchand, Charlie McAvoy, I'm sure I'm missing some names as well. But what the point I'm trying to get down to and at is that that experience has Stanley Cup rings. So does the experience on Tampa. Toronto, not so much. So that experience knows uh, when to panic, when to change things throughout the course of the season. And so I think it's going to come down to really um, a mental, emotional, battle between Boston and Tampa as the season rages on. Excuse me, because Ottawa at this point, I mean, the way they've been trending lately, really, really, disappointing season. at least to start for this Ottawa team. I really thought they were going to come out the gates a little bit better than this. They're at the bottom of the division. They don't pose a threat to that last playoff spot. Buffalo, I don't think is really. I think where they're at is where they're going to stay. They might flip flop with Ottawa here and there, and then I think the bottom three of this division really rounds out with Montreal, where I look at Detroit in that number 5 spot in the division with at 18 points at the time of this recording, and I look at them as a wild card, and I kind of equate it to for all my Always Sunny in Philadelphia fans out there, the wild card episode with Charlie, and he's just yelling wild card in the van and all that, discussing his dynamic in the group. And I feel like that's what the Red Wings are in this division. You don't know. They could go either way. They could, leapfrog the Panthers, who I'm not gonna diss the Panthers and say that they're gonna have a hangover, but I'm still not convinced that with Kachuk that they are a better team. So we'll see what happens with that. But yeah, Detroit, I think the only team that I'm looking back on, if our eyes are set on catching up to Boston, we have to look backwards and really keep an eye on Detroit, not as really a threat, but almost as a what they're doing to other teams. What are they going to do to a team like Toronto when those teams match up? What are they going to do to a Florida when those teams match up? What do they do to Boston when they match up with that team as well? So that's definitely a team to keep an eye on. I mean, who knows? They could get on a roll. They do have the talent. Relatively, it is young. But they do have the goaltender. And, I wouldn't be surprised if we're here mid-February discussing the possibility of Detroit vying for that last playoff spot. So we'll obviously keep an eye on that as the season progresses, as well as the Tampa Bay Lightning really making a push towards that first place spot in the Atlantic Division. And we'll talk more about this game, what this means for the Lightning going forward, as well as the upcoming games over the next couple of weeks to round out the month of November. So in the meantime, that's been it for this episode of Locked On Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam Danker. I'll talk to you next one.